Marcia, welcome to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the places we might go in this conversation. The kind of big picture stuff and the details, and all those things from all your years of experience. But just to start off with, I'm really curious, where did you first come across this thing called coaching?
Well, I actually came out of the corporate world in the learning and development. I ran training departments for companies and multinational companies. One where within 3 years we went from bankruptcy to top success in the US. And it was always important to me to work with the top leaders, to really look at mindset and beliefs and what do we need to shift in order to move forward. So there was always that foundation. And let me say that, I'm giving away my age, but in the late 80s, I got my second master's in learning psychology. What does it really take to learn? So I was always curious about that. And people would come through my classes and say, I love them, and then go back and do the same thing. So it was actually right when I was resigning from my last company, and I thought I was going to go out and just do leadership training. And I read an article about coaching, and I'm like, this is it. I really love my one-on-one relationships and really working with people to shift their thinking. And I know I'm not doing it just right because I'm a trainer by nature and I tell people what to do. So I immediately signed up for a coaching school. This was 1995, and it happened to be the coaching school where the founders started the International Coach Federation. So the timing was perfect for me to get into coaching just as it was coming out in the world, and to be a part of creating an association that supported the growth of coaching in the world. So it was just a coincidence that I chose it at the time that was right. And I went to get my doctorate about 6 years later just to learn more about how coaching impacts the brain. So I really got into the brain and the science of coaching and found it is the best learning technology we have. And people often think, it's a therapy. No, it's not. It's a learning technology. And we can get into that conversation because I'm adamant about that.
Well, and just because it's right here, what is it about coaching that makes it the best learning technology that we have?
Because there's a big difference on where we impact the brain when we tell people what to do and when we coach them. So when we're telling them and mentoring them, we're only working with the cognitive brain. Okay, now if they get excited and go, wow, that's awesome, thank you, then maybe it'll get into the middle brain. I'll talk about that in a minute, but there has to be an emotional reaction. So I may hear you and say, yeah, that's really great, I'll go try it. But then I have so many distractions. By the time I get to it, I'm going to misinterpret what you said, I'm going to change it, or I'm going to totally forget. And then when I go to sleep at night, my brain sorts through what I accumulated during the day and throws out the majority of it. So tomorrow I won't remember, and then you're going to get mad at me for not remembering or remembering wrong. And I know that's what hurts most personal relationships. But I told you, Yeah. So coaching actually works in the middle brain, so when I ask you, so what's going on? How do you see this? And you start to tell me your story, you're pulling it out of your long-term memory. All right. And then I'm just having you look at your story, and by using reflection, by saying, so you're telling me this, is that right? Which makes you then examine your story. And then I would ask a question. What is it that makes you see it in that one way? Is there any other possibilities? Are questions that we ask. And that forces you to examine. As soon as you start examining and you start seeing, that belief is old and doesn't serve me anymore, or yeah, I am assuming the worst, or there's a conflict of values, and all the things that we bring up in coaching, that it starts to change the story. Okay. And so we're changing the story, we're changing the frames, and what we're holding on to in our middle brain, which as soon as I have an aha or an insight, it'll change who I think I am. It will change how I see the world, and it will change my behavior permanently. Okay. And it's the best technology we have for that. But that still makes it adaptable change. I mean, I can scare you into change and it's permanent, but then it's not adaptable. So we're not going to go there.
Right. And in the complexity of the modern world, we want the adaptable. We want to equip people with the adaptable change.
Yeah, right. Or a lot of people, adaptable, agile. Got to work on the middle brain.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. We could go off in any direction from here, and part of me wants to geek out on all that stuff that you're just talking about and hinting at.
Right.
But before we do that, maybe we'll come back to it. So, were there many coach trainings around in the mid '90s, or what was
two schools?
It was only two. I was going to say, what were they at that point? Which two? Which one did you train at?
Well, there was actually three. There was CTI and Coach U.
Okay.
I chose Coach U. Seemed to have a little bit more corporate perspective. And there was a smaller school Fran Fisher owned up in northwestern US, ACT. And she has since sold it to Janet Harvey. But it was a small school, and I got to know her more as we were, the International Coach Federation was coming out, and those that were pioneers in this field all came together. There's a whole other story. CTI created their own association that had to merge, and I was a part of the merging of the two into one board, into the broader ICF, because it happened in Phoenix, and so they asked me to come facilitate it because I had board experience. So there was two separate associations that merged in the late 90s as well. So it's an interesting history.
Yeah. And, I guess I'm curious about two things. One is I'm curious about that. And, for you, you've been a part of ICF in different ways. I think was in your bio, it's like one of the first MCCs, as well. It's like there's loads of, and clearly it's the importance of that body is there. I'm curious to kind of hear your perspectives on that. But I'm also curious I'm also curious what happened as you did the training and then came out of it with the new skills and how that led you into working with those skills.
Yeah. Actually, the day I resigned, one of the senior VPs came to me and said, "Oh my God, who am I going to talk to now that you're leaving?" And I'm like, well, I don't know. You can't talk to me. But then he said the magic words. He says, "I'll pay you."
Amazing.
Like, oh, people are willing to pay me for this.
What a great gift from that VP, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. And he was like one of my first clients. And again, it was the whole synchronicity of timing. Companies were starting to ask me, "Oh, you do this coaching thing. Would you come teach coaching to our leaders?" So I found in the first couple of years, everything was focused on coaching. But it still took me a long time. People would say, "So what do you do for a living?" And I'd say, "Oh, I do leadership training and some consulting. And I also do this coaching thing." It took me, another year or so before I would say I'm a coach.
Yeah. What do you think that was about? And what helped you shift into, I love that order of how we introduce ourselves, like starts off as a kind of mumbled thing at the end, kind of a bit embarrassed about, and then gradually it works its way up.
It's an interesting question, Robbie, because I often get it with my new coaching students. I talk about coaching fears. What is it you're most afraid of? And one of the top fears is that they're afraid they're not giving value. If all they're doing is reflecting and asking questions, it's like, what value am I if that's it? And there are some top leaders in this world, I will not name names, that say, no, we have to give them advice, because that's why they come to us. No, it's not. Eventually, if there's nothing there for them to draw from, then I might say, would you like some suggestions? But most of our clients are really smart people. They kind of know what to do, but they're stuck knowing if it's the best thing, what direction, is this going to work? Am I going to ruin someone's life? It's their questions that are getting in the way. And so when I help my really smart clients to find their own way forward, not only are they more grateful, but I have totally changed their brain. So we get back to that learning. So when I started to see really the impact that I was having with coaching, and that it was far more than training, that I realized training is just an event to inspire people to learn more. It doesn't teach them, because that takes the partnership where people, they have the aha moment, they create the commitment, and they go out and try it, and then they need to evaluate it, and they may take 3 steps forward, 1 step back. And so the implementation really works when you work with someone over time. So I like to even combine, maybe a training class and then follow-up coaching, and I certainly have, the skills to do that, to design the training, but it's the coaching that I found more powerful. So when I realized the value I'm truly giving my clients is number one, coaching, then I felt better saying, yeah, I'm a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. How interesting though, that it was like you had to feel the reality of it.
Yes.
But it also sounds like, you had a real commitment to helping people change.
Yes.
And so when you start seeing, oh wait, this one thing works really well to do that, much better than this other thing, is that what kind of carried you down more of the coaching route?
Absolutely. But I told you that ever since that degree, I was always curious, what does it take for people to learn? Yeah. But even before that, what you just said, that, that commitment to help people to change, to be better, that came even long before that. Huh. I had, and you can easily find my history online. I've done TED Talks about my sordid past.
Well, just for anyone who hasn't seen them, you can't say sordid past and not expect me to ask for something about that. So give us something about that.
Okay, I turned 20 in jail. I went down a really dark path starting at about age 11, 12, that just got deeper in the rabbit hole of drug abuse. And I still managed to get straight A's in school. I was this crazy thing.
Impressive.
And then after high school, it just got dark. But it was an amazing transformation that happened. And again, not because of the criminal justice system, but because of the women I was with in jail that helped me to see who I am and what I could be in the world. It was my big, tough cellmate, who like pinned me against the wall and said, stop it. You have no idea who you are. You need to get back out there and make a difference in this world. And, she like, wow. And my first tough coach.
Yeah. What was her name?
Vicky.
Well, amazing work, Vicky, right?
No, I'm grateful to her. I have a hidden memoir on Amazon called Unexpected Angels. I don't promote it. That tells the story, but my TED Talks do too. And and since that time, people will say to me, what really prompted you to change, to go from being an addict to being multiple degrees and working around the world? And for a number of years, I said, oh no, I just decided. And then this one woman said to me, I'm not asking you to praise you. I'm asking you because I have a drug addict son I need to help. And I'm like, oh my God. Right. I need to define, what made the shift for me so I can help other people. And I'm grateful for being alive, for being out here every day, because I shouldn't be if it wasn't for those women and for Vicky. Yeah, I was on the edge. So so that was really important. So I defined it, and I realized it's not what a lot of people think. It really was a a shifting of who I think I am, and not as helpless and not a victim. Okay. But that I could define, I could source my reality. I could create my path. And I could use my anger to do that. Not even just my passion, but my anger. And it really launched me in a new trajectory. So I had this desire, but wasn't sure exactly what to do. And so the inquiry took a number of years until I finally found coaching. That's it. So I'm totally an evangelist for coaching.
Amazing. And so, and then I guess as time went on, you had this training background, you had the corporate background, but what have been the key moments as you found your, I guess, place in the world of coaching?
Well, again, being that the timing, and I always, my father always said, if I'm going to join something, I'm going to become a leader, otherwise forget it. So it was always in my blood. If I'm going to join something, I'm going to be a leader. So I'm like, okay, I can be a part of this, building this coaching thing in the world. And the ICF came up, and I was actually handed the opportunity to be a part of the leadership, and stepped right into it, because I was the president of the ICF just a little over 2 years of joining the board, because of the turmoil that was going on and the board experience I had to date. A lot of coaches don't have. I was on mental health boards, a number of them here, before finding coaching. And so I had experience that I could bring to the table, because we were right on the edge, the ICF, if we were going to, really come out and stay viable and exist in the world. And we had to make some shifts. And so I stepped into that space, and I was asked to step into that space. And I said, yeah, I can do this. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that, you kind of, you're noting the serendipity of the timing, but also there's a sense that you were someone that with the kind of experience that they needed at that time.
Yeah.
And especially early in an organization's life, right? The people who are involved at that point, I've had a much smaller scale than ICF in lots of ways, but the small organizations that I've been a part of, trustee for charities and that kind of thing, it's beautiful to be there, quite at the start, and know that you've got that, you're playing that part in what comes after.
Right.
What, I guess, having seen that and seen ICF and the coaching industry as a whole evolve over the years, and we might get into, maybe now, maybe later, some of the just kind of strange things about the coaching industry and the struggles that many of us who, how do we say these things? It's like, I think that you and I have been reading your book, which has just come out just this week as we're recording. Is that right?
Yes, June 2nd.
June 2nd. So it'll be obviously a little later by the time people are hearing this, but just been reading that. And one of the things I loved about reading it was, I was like, phew, we agree. It's one of those things. I'm sure there are bits that, I would phrase differently and all that kind of thing. But broadly speaking, it's just great to hear that sense. This is, okay, yeah, we agree on what coaching is. And also, what makes it powerful. But not everyone does those things. So and it feels like ICF has an important role, and has probably played an important role, which I'm not even aware of, having been in coaching only 5 years, in holding that part of the industry. So I guess I'm just curious, this is a very long, and it's barely a question, is it? But it's like, to give you that, to say, what is your perspective on the role that ICF has played on behalf of coaches over the last, 20 years or so?
25,
yeah.
Some of the things we focused on early on were critical to having coaching have its own identity and its own profession. And we knew that was important. So what drove the being of the ICF, not just the growth, was the distinction of coaching, the definition of coaching, and the coaching competencies. So we'd have our own certification, because we're not licensed. And if we had not created those distinctions and defined coaching, it would have just gone, it's still muddled. Where people that are consultants call themselves coaches, but they're not really coaching. And a lot of people do that. Okay, so we knew that we had to really, sort out in the world what it is. And a lot of people disagree with what we call it. And that's just going to happen. But we still needed to say this is what we stand for. And because I know that the science supports it, and they know that, there's thousands of research articles on the research portal online. And that it is very distinct technology. It is not therapy. It is not problem solving. That's why the book title is Coach the Person, Not the Problem, because we're not just problem solving. And it comes out of learning theory, which is where I come from. There are some therapies that look like coaching, like cognitive behavioral therapies, looking at limiting beliefs. So there's overlap. So I'm not going to say there's not. But it did not come out of therapy. And I know that my doctorate is in psychology. I do know, and clinical psych. So I do know the difference. And so we really had to define that. But I have to say that, certification came out just right before I became president. So it slammed me. And we were in process of hiring our first professional association. And we were kind of stuck in the middle. So I was getting all the emails and phone calls. And so many of them were from these therapists saying, you should just give me certification because I have this degree. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. You have to prove you can coach. We have to define it, or we will not survive. And we had to come out. So recognize too, I'm the first ICF president, and I was the fifth, that had a corporate background. Prior to me, it was all personal coaching and small business coaching. And I had the mission of bringing this into executive coaching in the corporate space, because I said, if we do not do that, we will not survive either.
And wait, because you were already getting some, so it sounds like the corporate world had some idea about coaching already, because unless I've got the timeline slightly wrong, because you were beginning to get asked those questions, so there was some awareness that it was a thing from the corporate world, but there wasn't the sense that it was important to solidify around that. Is that right? When you became president?
Well, on the corporate side, it was just, again, because I became aware of coaching through an article. So yeah, they had been aware of it and looking at how some of the skills might support them. But I have to say, especially here in the US, they were still looking at give me a couple of skills so I can just go off and do it. So it's not that they didn't embrace it, they just didn't really quite know what it was. Until really in the last 5 years that they've been coming to me saying, okay, we had our workshop, we've been trying this and it's not quite right, and we know there's more. Would you come in and do a deeper dive with us? That's starting to happen here. I have to say that outside of the US, that deeper dive happened earlier, including China, where I tend to teach a lot, not right now, but that the company said, we have to do this. We have to listen differently to the younger generation. We don't like it, but we know we have to.
That's a great response. But and how courageous as well, right? We don't like it, but we know it's important. Yeah.
We know it's important. So and I found the embracing coaching as a leadership style and a mindset much quicker in Europe than in the US, even though it started here and we have more coaches here. Get in the corporate world, it just took longer to get them to see this is a cultural shift, this is a mindset shift, not just here's a few skills and questions to ask.
Yeah, why do you think that was, that it took longer in the States?
Because they don't want to pay for training that's more than a couple hours, or a half a day, or to really go into what it takes. And they weren't accepting the reality how much of the shift was needed. it's really sad. I was talking to a woman this morning, and we were talking about how change doesn't truly happen until there's a crisis.
Right. And again, let's bring it in then, because, we're in this interesting moment right now, in the middle of coronavirus pandemic. And then there are lots of other things going on in the States right now after the death of George Floyd.
Right.
So which I'm sure you're much more aware of than I am, several thousand miles away. So it's interesting to slow down in that space that we're in today, because when these things happen, there is an opportunity for change. Just like in some ways when you were in, with Vicky, like there was a load of disrupted stuff there in your life, and there was an opportunity for change, and definitely things did change.
And I wouldn't even call it an opportunity. I'd call it a need. I'd call it it's a forced recognition that we have to do this. And every company I worked in too, it's like they would not change until they had to. And will that ever change? I don't know. Why they do that, there's a multitude of reasons. One, they just don't want to. It's like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Well, it is broken. You're just not looking at the stats that prove that. You're looking at what you want to. So, you can make stats say whatever you want. So, that forced change. And that's what I'm hoping is happening now with, and I'm sad about the whole incident with, and that's ongoing really with the police here in the States, but that it's, I believe, finally forcing that we have to change. And it isn't about, yes, we have to fix things, but we have to listen first. It was Martin Luther King that had said that he was for nonviolence, and he said, I don't support, riots, but the riot indicates that voices aren't heard. And you remember the first time I taught a class in Kenya, and I was talking to her about, I went out on the street and I felt uncomfortable. And she says, yes, there's a lot of crime here, but that's because people are desperate. And so when we look at, what other people will call is like unnecessary violence, but what needs to be heard? And why do people feel desperate? They have to go to that length? Can we not be in that inquiry and try to understand that? And it was just this morning, I was listening to this video, and this guy was saying, we need to just shut up and listen. He said, white people, you need to shut up. I'm like, well, yeah. And, I learned, so ACTO, the Association of Coach Training Organizations, has been focused on cultural diversity and inclusion for a number of years in our coach training. And I learned from one of their sessions that, it's not about me trying to explain people my intention. Or no, I do understand. My grandparents were immigrants, bullshit. It's about getting that whatever I said hurt somebody, or set them off wrong. Can it help me understand? Let me listen to you, and let me accept that that's your truth. I need to start there, to quit thinking I know and to be curious, which is truly the foundation of coaching. So, using a coach approach to all of our conversations right now is so important to give up knowing and being in using compassionate curiosity, which is a big part of the book. We're not grilling people, that we're truly curious because we care, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like, I think it's on a video on your website or the book's website or something. There's a kind of question which is like, why another book about coaching? And I think we're in that, the answer to that question in this moment. But I just wondered if you could maybe tell me a little bit about I guess you clearly believe in coaching. You've talked about it, believing it on the scientific level. You've talked about the kind of desire for change and the passion for change. And then you've talked about this, why now, or an element of that some of the things that are bubbling up in society right now are about listening not happening in that way, or, and more. What this, you've written books before, but this one in particular, Coach the Person, Not the Problem. What called you to write that book?
Well, I never stepped away from teaching. I said, yes, I'm coaching, but I've been teaching coaching skills and mentoring. And I was one of the first ICF assessors. I was an assessor for Coach U. There was just 3 of us, and one of them, and I won't say his name, would just come to the call and say, yeah, whatever I agree. So there was really only 2 of us. Me and Harriet Simon Salinger were the first 2 assessors. And so I've been watching coaches and listening to them and hearing where they get stuck for over 20 years now. And I'm on faculty for schools, not just in the US, but China, Russia. And I'm working with Julius Ordonez and bringing in a coaching program in August in the Philippines. And I'm just working on a new one in India. So I'm all over. So what I'm saying is global. It's not just here in the US. That coaches there's just some beliefs where they've gotten stuck in some ruts, and they're not fully coaching the person in front of us, and holding a coaching mindset and really being present and having the conversation, having their reflections, their questions come out of the conversation instead of a list of questions they memorized, or I have to follow this so I can pass my certification, and checklist coaching. And so these beliefs and their practices and their fears were really coming forward. And so one of the things I love is every time I do a coaching demo for WBEX, and I've got one coming up June 15th, people always say, you can do that? You can do that? And, I'm doing this big program on breakthrough coaching for WBEX in the fall. And that's going to be one of the big promo things. It's like, yes, you can do this. Because they'll say, but my school said you couldn't. And frankly, I'm not so sure their schools didn't say that. I think, people hear things in a way that, like I said, it's in their cognitive brain and they misinterpret it.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Because I think that is true. Some of the, I really agree that quite often the things that people think they're not allowed to do in anything, but we're talking about coaching, aren't really things that anyone said you're not allowed to do. So what do you think's happening there?
Let me give you an example. I used a lot of closed questions up front when I'm really clarifying, what is it you really want? Where are we going with this? I never get yes or no answers. It really is a clarifying technique, or I use a lot of distinctions. You say you're tired. Are you physically tired, or are you just sick of doing what you're doing? I'm really paring it down to where are we going in this conversation? But we teach that the open question is something we want to focus on because people don't do that well. They don't realize that even the ICF competencies say there's got to be a balance more of open questions and closed. They don't say no closed questions. Nobody ever said that. But what they hear is the focus on open questions, asking the what questions, the how questions, because it's harder to do. So I'm going to focus my teaching on open questions because it's harder and you don't do it as much. So what they then interpret, they've been taught in many of their classes, like, don't use closed questions. That's just been something that in mentoring and leadership, don't use closed questions. So they tie in their old inherited beliefs with what they're hearing in their training, and then they interpret it as, don't ask a closed question. And so then they hear me ask a bunch of them and they go, you can do that? I'm like, absolutely. Let's look at what happened when I did. Now there's an art to the closed question as well, of really knowing what's the purpose of it. How is it going to help them? So, and it's not the why question, why'd you do that? It's truly helping people to go deeper into where are we going? What is it you really want to create instead of what you have, to have them to look at their stories. I use a lot of reflection, so you're telling me this is the way you see the situation. Is that right? So is that right is a closed question. Okay. But it doesn't get a closed answer. They'll say, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that is, but there's a little bit more to it, or no, somebody told me that. That's not my thinking. So my goal is to get them to examine their thinking, to take it out, to use their observer mind, to look at the stories they're living by and what's holding the stories together. And maybe we can pop the stories, which then changes their thinking and their behavior. That's what I'm doing. And so what I can do to do that will be some of these, what people think, our hard, fast rules, like coaching is just about asking questions. No. In fact, I had a conversation with Michael Bungay-Stanier, who, is his endorsements on the cover of my book, because his big bestseller, The Coaching Habit, was about the 7 questions. And I said, I just want to know that I love your book. And I don't feel that, we're in contrast. He says, absolutely not. He says, that book was written for leaders. You're writing for coaches. That book was written for leaders who are always telling people what to do. And I just wanted to get them into a questioning mode. That's it. Then when they see the power, then they'll read your book.
Yeah, I was thinking about your book when I was reading it and thinking, like, who is this book? It's not for, but it's like, where would this book have the most impact? And it made me think of a couple of books that I read, early on. It's like after the training or the certification, and it's exactly that thing you said. It's like, you can do that. Just a reminder, just a like a centered on the core and the really valuable things in coaching. And that's clearly in the book in a bunch of different ways. It's like, reminding me of what's important, releasing me from some of those, becoming a victim of our training, or what we think our training said in some ways, isn't it? And and it's I love that you say that about coaching demos. I think it's a really underdone thing to share those coaching demos, just widely. And the value of watching and listening to other people coaching, especially people with a lot more experience than us, but even people with a lot less experience than us sometimes, because they're much closer to their training and bringing all that wonderful beginner's mind, is just a reminder, you can do that, can't you? And I had a beautiful, having been reading your book, I had a lovely coaching call last night. Well, I was just more in tune with that thing, that one of the things you say in the book, which is, just kind of listening for when, or, not necessarily with the ears, but with the whole body, for the moment where something's happening for the client. And then just checking with them. What's happening in this moment? What's there? What was that? And it's beautiful. Exactly. It's like lovely to watch the people slow right down. And it's not that I've never done that before, but it's why it's great to keep learning about coaching, because it just brings that stuff into your consciousness, and then you sit with a client and somehow pick that stuff up.
Yeah. And not only is that so amazing, when you're just saying, wow, okay, you just got really quiet and looked away there. Well, what's happening right now? Just to share what you noticed and see what happens. Because again, we don't stop and examine our thinking on our own. We don't. The behavioral economist, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. We need what's called an external disruptor. And coaches are external disruptors. And this is even in the neuroscience. Michael Gazzaniga talks a lot about, we don't have free will on our own. Our brains take over, and the more emotions you have, the more it'll force you to do what you would logically not do if you thought about it. And so all we're doing is making people pause, and as John Dewey, who I talk a lot about in the book, says, we're just having people climb a tree in their mind, and then look down on their thinking in a way they can't do for themselves. So they can go, well, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's true. I think that way, but it's more crazy.
Yeah, I love. There's so many ways we could go from here. I'm curious to hear you just talk about John Dewey a little bit, because he's a name that was familiar to me, and then I had to look him up after you mentioned him in the book a bit. But it's interesting to get that sense of how much he might be a part of the kind of lineage of coaching, even if he doesn't necessarily get that credit. But I also just want to pull, because one of the sections of the book is 5 crazy beliefs, which includes that questions are needed, and only open questions. But I really like this one about reflective statements. People think that reflective statements are too confrontational, and when I read that heading, I was like, oh wow, that is true that people think that. And yet it made me think of an amazing coaching demo I saw before I even thought about doing training. Actually, I used to work at a leadership training organization, and one of the days or afternoons that people who came on this course had was an intro to coaching skills. And this great trainer called Deb Barnard, who's a British woman, she did this amazing demo where she almost only reflected back what was happening to the person, and yet it was like reflecting back, just pulling out a few words, and it was almost the most gentle coaching I'd ever seen. Like the client didn't even really know that Deb was reflecting the words. It was so gentle. And so it's really interesting that people think it's something that it's not always gentle, right? Because it can be direct
I was thinking of Byron Katie. When Byron Katie does it, you go,
exactly. Yeah. And
her power is in her reflection. So she might say, so, how do you know that's true? But it's in the reflection. This is what you just said. This is what you just said. Okay. Yeah. No, it's amazing. And I want to say that particular fear comes out of a lot of my work in Asia, where they're like, oh, I can't do that. And I was like, and there's an interesting belief. What makes you think that that's a bad thing to do?
Yeah, we probably get it more in Britain actually than you do in the States as well, with our interminable politeness. Whereas the Americans and the Dutch, they're there giving direct, serious direct reflection.
Well, there's a difference. I was listening this week to Gretchen Rubin, and she was talking about the different tendencies and expectations and the styles, and she mentioned the difference between straight talk and blunt talk. And I think I'm going to write a blog post this weekend, actually, on there's straight talk, there's blunt talk, and then there's real talk. And right now we're needing some real talk that is not just what I think about the situation, but about, let's talk about what's out on the table, and let me listen first before I share that with you. And I'm always saying to people, well, wait a second, I'm not telling them anything out of my own brain. Like I even had a client just yesterday who got really irritated with me. He says, well, you're doing this right now, basically like telling what to do. And I said, okay, let's stop for a second. Here's what I just shared with you, because they were the words you shared with me. I was just checking in on you of what that meant, and he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. And I have to say, at the end of the conversation, he gave me such a great compliment about how this is so helping him get through his blocks and try in communicating to others and what he's trying to get across. But I have to challenge him, but I'm not challenging him out of my head. I'm using his words. So the significant piece of reflection is reflection. It's an active replay of what I hear you say and what I notice in terms of your expression. So I'm just sharing what you gave me, and I'm okay if you get angry. I'm okay. That was my last book, was The Discomfort Zone. It's okay, as a coach, you're not there to make them feel better. You're there to make them see better. They may not like what they see. Okay, that's fine. You just hold the space, don't react, and just let them walk through it, because they will, but they may get a little defensive in the process. That's okay. I don't care.
But it's also a great, that story is great because they might get defensive about what's coming out of them. And the way to be sure that it's not your fault, right? Like as a coach, especially early on, the fear is, I made them angry. But if you're just giving them their words back, it's not you, right? It's just when they see that, which they may have never seen. And I love those ones where people say, I love that thing you said, or that thing you said really changed. And you're just like, no, you said it.
You said
they were literally your words.
Exactly.
And if we had a recording,
it's like, don't give me credit. I'm just giving you what you said. Yeah. They like to do that at the end, and so many coaches go, yeah, I'm a great coach. No, nice. I want to give you the credit for sharing it so I can give it to you, but you shared it in the first place, so that was awesome.
Yeah. And there's some kind of thread, and I think you write about it in this book, but I want to just sort of check it, because I think one of the ways, it's like, one of the questions, if I was a coach just starting out still, it's like, so it's sometimes open questions are good and sometimes closed questions are good. And wait, the reflection, but how do I know if I'm getting it right? And the answer to me feels like it's a lot in developing our presence in different ways, and the different ways we talk about it, and really being there in that space for them. But I'm curious.
Okay, so I pulled out two things in there. How do I know I'm getting it right? Okay, so there's the internal and the external. Okay, so how do I know I'm really picking up something and it's not my interpretation and my stuff? Or how do I know that I'm sharing the right thing? Right? Is that right, Robbie?
Yeah, I think both those are worries that definitely go on for people, and me sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. First off, don't worry about it. I always tell coaches, if you're sitting there thinking about, is this my opinion? Is this my interpretation? Then you are not present.
It's a great point, right? Yeah, it's like better to share the thing and get it out there than spend the next 5 minutes wondering whether to do it or worrying about whether you've done it.
Yeah, but as soon as you share it, pay attention. Because then if, I've seen coaches do this, they really kind of start leading the client, and the client gets irritated. They keep doing it. It's like, stop and say, okay, so tell me what's going on. I see you're a little hesitant or resistant. Did I go too far? What's happening here? And let them say, and I'm fine being wrong, because what if you're wrong, what will people say? That's not it. This is it. And then they tell you. So don't worry about it. You'll get better at it as you go along, and taking yourself, and your own ego out of it. That'll happen as you practice. So just share, but really work on, what's interesting about when I put the book together, I have the 5 essential practices and the 3 mental habits. And I went back and forth. Do I put the mental habits first and then the practices, or the practices and then the habits? And I had long talks with my editor, and he says, I think people want to get into the practices right away. And then you get into, but they're not going to work if you don't do this. So the whole establishing your full body presence before you go into a conversation of, so I'm able to receive what you're giving me, not just hear it, but to fully receive it. We get better at that, which then it's not as likely. As soon as I receive it, I give it back to you without thinking. So it's really more of, I'm in the flow with you. And if I get triggered by what you say, I catch it. I release it, because I'm judgmental. We're all judgmental. I'll judge what you're saying.
I love that bit in the book, talking about being judgy. It's great. It's like,
I feel it right here in my solar plexus. It goes, eh. Yeah. And it's like, oh, look, I'm being judgmental. Fascinating. Which allows me to let it go, so I can come back and just, share with you what's up, what you just gave me.
And just, I know it's in the book, but for people who are listening, who are curious, how do you, when you've got a coaching session coming, how do you prepare yourself so that you can
Yeah.
have the full body presence? What's your practice or habit?
Well, interesting thing. I first thought, so I arranged my office to where I look out the windows, because I said, oh, I have a beautiful mountain I look at, and and trees, and it's such a nice view. Okay, now please understand, I live in Arizona, which is desert. And what I quickly found that during the day, while most people at work, there's critters that come in, it's like, oh, there's a coyote. And one day I saw this big, and there is such a real bird as a road runner. Okay, it's not just a cartoon. And they're big birds, and this big road runner came running up. Now I don't have a lawn, it's rocks. And he had a snake in his mouth, and he started bashing the snake on the rocks. And I'm trying to coach, and I'm like, excuse me, I have National Geographic going on in front of me.
I love it. Marcia, that just makes me think, though, I'm a big fan of when something happens in the world during a coaching session, what if it's a message from the universe? And I'd love, like, what message from the universe is the roadrunner bashing the snake to you or your client? Like, it's got to be deep and complex.
It's like, now I realize I can't do this. There's too many things going on outside my window. So I do have a space in my house that's cool and comfortable and quiet. It's in the back of the house, and I only go there to coach. And so first off, I do that. I make sure I'm in that space, so there's no distractions. And then even if it's a rush day, I've got to, like, breathe, be present, remember who this client is, how much I care about them. I mean, even if it's just 5 seconds, as long as I can breathe in, clear my space, remember I care about my client, that I'm going in with curiosity and care. I do that. And then I've really worked on my emotional intelligence, my emotional regulation. I was like, developed that expertise early on, before I was really out there in the world with coaching. And I love seeing that the ICF has it as a new competency starting next year, coaching mindset, which includes emotional regulation, to recognize emotional hits during our coaching, so we can breathe it out and come back and be present. And the one piece that I found missing in most teaching about emotions was the judgment. That people think judgment is an opinion, and they don't recognize it's an emotion. And even thinking, oh, I must tell my client what to do, that's a judgment, that they're not capable, that they're not smart and resourceful, and you've just judged them. So I think that catching judgment as a biological reaction, which those emotions are all biological reactions first, and then they impact our thinking. It's not the other way around. So to be able to catch judgment as an emotion is critical, so we can regulate ourselves quickly, so we can stay present with our clients. So those mental habits are critical in creating the coaching mindset. So I work on that. Yeah, and no, I'm not perfect. I don't know a perfect coach. It's a journey that we're always on, and I get better every year and wonder what I was doing last year. I love that I teach it. It makes me very conscious, because I have to do demos in front of thousands of people. I better be good at this.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that teaching and training something does change the way you experience it. I remember the guy Phil, who ran the training that I did, he told a story when we did our second module, I think. So we did like several weekend modules, and he said he did possibly his best ever coaching session the day after having taught us the basics of coaching again, just because it got him right back in that space. And
Yeah.
it's definitely
Teach what we most need to learn.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But Marcia, I'm curious, because you've clearly done teaching and training of coaching a lot. And this book is in some ways, teaching and training coaching, albeit in book form instead of in you form. What is it about that you love, and how come that's such a part of your work and life?
The teaching?
Yeah, the training of coaches, the teaching of coaching.
Well, I, I told you what I did before and my background. It's like I'm even when I get my charts read, I just had my numerology and palm done, and my astrology, everything all says I'm a teacher. So I think I came into this life with that archetype. Yeah, because it's like, what drives me to do that? It's not that I'm such an expert that people should know it. And I've been accused of that. And I say, no, I'm run by my passion more than the fame. Do I like the fame? Absolutely. Please go out and buy my book. But that's not the main driver. I have this great, one of my true values of life is to learn and to share, to take even technical things and translate them. So understand that 11 of my 16 years in corporations were for technical companies, primarily male engineers, that I was teaching them communication skills, a lot of translation.
Right.
They love the science though.
Yeah. But
I had to translate that for them into practical and how they could actually do it, and they can make the shift if they wanted to. So I saw myself as a translator. So it was more about purpose, that I find this fascinating things that I think need to be out in the world that's going to help us come together. But again, I think it comes back to those moments when I was 20 and when I got out and realized that my life had been saved. It was that question, like many of us go through when we go through life-threatening situations, which it was. Why am I here? What is my purpose? So I happened to be in that question in my 20s, which was very early on. But I had reached a breaking point. Either I would die, spend the rest of my life in prison, or find my way out of the hole. And fortunately, I found my way. So that great desire to help other people find their way has been since then. Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on, but in this time, this moment we're in, this time in history, why is, let me just see if I can get the question. I feel from you, and I think I feel it too, that coaching and coaching skills and coaches have a part to play. There's something for me very much aligned about some of the challenges and disconnection in different ways in the world. And, what you, I, many coaches have developed in ourselves through our work, you can see how those things meet in different ways. But I'm just curious to hear you talk a little bit about the part that you think that coaching and coaching skills and coaches have to play in this this curious next phase of history, where none of us quite know what's going to happen, the complexity and the disruption that's going on. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit for us.
Why I feel coaching is so important, it's not necessarily you have to be a coach, but taking on that coaching mindset that let me be present, let me be curious, let me care about what you have to say, that we may have academically known we need to do that, but now there's something in our gut that says we have to, in order for this world to get through this dark time. And that those of us that come from a place of privilege, it's our responsibility to hear, to know, to get what they're saying. Will I ever live out their experience? No. So true empathy, I can have a little bit, but not, but to say I've not lived your experience, so I cannot go to that, but let me hear what it is that you feel that I can do, that we can be together, that it really is about respecting and trusting the person in front of us is smart, no matter what their level of education and what they've grown up with. There's also a really interesting aspect. I was talking to someone yesterday about culture, that in Western civilization, which tends to be white. So North America, Europe, we tend to focus a little bit more on individual need, and democracy is about my freedom and getting my needs met. We're not communal. One of the things teaching in China really opened my eyes to is a communal mindset. And how, like in my classes, I don't know, social status isn't apparent to me, because they're all in there together, and they're there and they support each other much better, than we do, because they were brought up with that taking care of each other much more than us. So I'm not saying that their politics is better or anything like that. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying there's a difference between a communal mindset and an independent mindset. That the communal mindset, it's, they tend to lean all the way over the other way, where it's like, oh, let me make you feel better. I always have to, like, don't touch. And my coaches is like, don't touch, don't run over and hug them, don't do that. Because that's what they're doing. People that say, oh, the Asians don't touch each other. Oh, especially the Chinese. It's a whole different way of looking at things. And so I think, this whole thing with COVID-19 saying, we're in this together. No, we're not. Everybody's out for themselves. I mean, look at it, here and in Europe, as soon as we said, okay, you can go outside, they did en masse. Nobody took care of each other, where they were much more cautious in China about how am I impacting other people? Is it really safe to go out? So the idea that it's not just about me, that the only way that I'm going to have my opportunities and make this world a better place is a better place for all, that we need, what the meaning of community is, my neighbors, my friends, my colleagues, and how can we be with each other to honor each other. And it's not just I'm out for me, that it's, somebody said this week, it's not about the strongest of the fittest, it's the strongest of the adaptable. And can we adapt what we need to right now? It's more about truly, if we're in this together, what does that look, what does together mean? Really, what does together mean? And truly exploring that. And so of being in the question, not the answers, is so critical. And so I see that coaching in the way that it takes to be present and to be curious and to truly listen and engage people in the way coaches do, is a critical time for that. So it's not to tell you to do something or to feel better. It's not about telling, it's about in the way that we listen to each other. And you'll notice in the book, I say, I don't even like active listening. I hate that, because it sounds like it's something I'm doing to you. I'm listening to you. It's like, no, that's not it. I'm receiving what you're giving me. I'm receiving and trying to release judgment about it and be present and truly understand. I like the concept of receiving even better than listening. So it's shifting. I believe shifting, finally. It took this horrible crisis to make us truly look at how do we connect and how are we together with each other, honestly, sincerely. That will shift that forever, I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's so many places we could jump off that from, but I guess I'm just, the bit that caught me towards the end is there's something about the cognitive nature of our societies as well that, we touched on that at the start. And again, that full body presence to really receive You know,
Yeah.
we're an instrument, right? An amazing instrument with all kinds of signals that we can pick up. And a lot of the
Yeah.
time people aren't used to picking those things up. And, you know, in
Well,
some
I want to
ways.
say they're good at it. They just don't listen to it.
Interesting. Is that what you think? And so what do people do to, or what can people do, whether they're coaches or not, to get better at listening to it?
Well, I actually ran into the research about opening the entire nervous system, the head, heart, and gut, when I was writing The Discomfort Zone. And there are some really good people out there that have been teaching this for a long time, the M-braining people in Australia, and other, all the somatic people. But the thing about it, somatic, then there's, I think, maybe a little bit too much focus then on just the body. The nervous system is all three: the gut, the heart, and the brain. So we're not throwing our brain out, And please don't ask people, so how are you feeling? They don't know. I hate that question. I would rather you say, wow, I noticed that you got really quiet, almost sad. What's that about? So you might pick up something, in the shift in your heart or in your gut, and you just share it. Okay, but share what you picked up. Don't just say, what are you feeling right now? It's like, there's a couple questions I hate, like, so what question should I ask you? It's like, don't give away your coaching. Don't do that. Don't abdicate to your clients. If you don't know, just say, I'm confused. Where are we going?
It's a great thing to say, right? Because if you're confused as a coach, the client might be well and might be really relieved to know it's okay to be confused.
It's okay. Yeah. Where do you think we're going with this? Yeah. Just state it. You can share, this is what I'm feeling right now, but don't ask the generic questions. Use their words, use their emotions. But back to this. I ran into some fabulous research by a therapist named Sherry Geller up in Toronto, looking at what's called therapeutic presence and the power of opening the head, the heart, and the gut before you go into therapy, and how it creates a sense of psychological safety where people will open up to you. Critical for leaders, critical for people right now, that I will only tell you what's on my mind if I feel safe with you, that you're not going to judge me and turn it around on me. So just by the act of opening my heart with care, compassion, gratitude, I always say, get your phone out, open your favorite pictures. You're going to see your cat and your kids and whatever, and they're going to open your heart. Okay, you can do that in a second. So you open your heart, and then you open your gut with courage by recalling a time in your life where you spoke up or stood up in spite of your fears, and just really activate that sense of courage. We all have something, even if we were a child, and really sense the openness. So, and we open our mind with curiosity. So again, the mind doesn't go away. It's an open mind, because what happens is the gut and the heart will pick up signals, and maybe if we're really intuitive, we can catch it and share it without thinking. But generally it goes up to the brain, and the brain interprets it, so the brain is activated anyway. So, and for you to formulate the words, you're using your cognitive brain. There's no language here. It's all up here. So can I share it with you before I start interpreting it? And stay open and just share with you. So it doesn't feel like I'm using my brain, but of course I'm using my brain, because I couldn't talk to you, if I wasn't. So I'm not saying the brain is less important. I'm saying you open up all three. And it allows you to receive, but it also creates a sense of safety. It's kind of a dual purpose, which is fabulous. And so needed right now, in these difficult conversations that we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. There were loads of parts of the book that I thought were interesting, but I found myself really curious in particular about the goaltending. And I wanted to make sure we got a chance to catch a couple of really nice things in there, and really interesting things. I wonder if you could talk to Outcome is not a problem or a process, which I think is a great
So I
thing
want
to
to say
really.
it's so great because I'm doing a little 3-minute video on goaltending tomorrow.
Ah, nice.
That was another one of those things that it's so hard to teach, and that coaches don't get. Like, okay, but we got to know where we're going. There has to be an outcome, and that's the ICF called it setting an agreement is totally confusing. Okay, so they parsed it out to there's the contracting up front, but the agreement in the session. Yes, we have to agree on the outcome. Okay, so a process is in an outcome. What will you get once you implement this process? What will you get when you make the decision, that you create the plan? I got to know where we're going. What is it you want to have instead of what you have today? And if you're not sure, that's okay. Let's just have a starting point of, paint me a picture of what you would really like to have, even if it's someplace in the future. Or even if it's just a feeling that you want to feel more confident, because we'll start there. The outcome always shifts as you go deeper into the coaching. So I did a demo for WBACS a couple of years back where the woman, started with that. She was going back to work after medical leave, and she started with, I just want to go in feeling confident because I've been gone for a while. Okay, that's fine. We started there. But as we got into it and I was really listening, no, she said she wanted to feel strong. Okay, so we defined that. And, first it was physically. Okay, so what is it that you think, that you're not ready? Or, well, and she kept going, well, but, okay, well, but says there's something else going on. Okay, so let's explore that a little bit more. What is it really that's that's getting in your way of going in and just succeeding? Because often they will say, yeah, and I know I can do that. Okay, so if you know you can do it, what is it that's really getting in the way of you feeling good about doing it? We start exploring their beliefs, their assumptions, the things that are paralyzing them. We kept getting deeper. And I said, okay, so it sounds as if you're worried that as soon as somebody disagrees with you, that you're going to backtrack and that you're going to blame your illness on that. And she's like, yeah. There's my concern about credibility. And so we looked at that a little bit. And I kept saying, is that what you want to work on? And then we drilled down, and she finally said to me, it's this exactly right here. It's this craziness that I do to myself. I have all these worries that puts me into a tailspin. And I can come up with all the excuses in the world, but it's about my own what ifs brain swirling. I said, okay, is that what you want to work on? How to manage that, and afterwards, one of the observers said, I want to ask the client, when she did that to you, did it annoy you that she kept saying, is that what you want to work on? Is that truly it? Is that where we're going? And she says, yeah, it was extremely annoying. And it was exactly what I needed, because
Right.
I need to know. It's like in the engineering world, we always did a root cause analysis. Okay, I want to know really, really what's at the surface here that's causing this turmoil, and it's within your beliefs, your focus on your assumptions about the future, the predictions you're making. And, there could be a conflict of values between the work you're doing and what you have, or it could be a social need. I need credibility from people, or, I won't feel strong. We're going to explore those things. Again, that's not therapy. I'm just saying, this is what I heard. What do you think? Is this what you need? Do you need to do something to get that? It's about where you're at today and how you're going to move forward. And we're just examining your thinking. Okay, I'm a thinking partner. I'm not trying to fix you or heal you, or go into, when did you create this? When you were 3? I don't care. When this first started that you worried yourself to death. I don't care. Let's just look at how it's impacting you now, and do you believe you can change it?
Yeah, and I really like that sense of the root cause. And just imagine, I mean, for that woman, I can really get it, right? In the demo, it's like, who else in her life ever would spend so much time with her trying to just understand, just
What
this,
is it really?
what's the actual thing here that matters?
Right. And so getting to that outcome can be the breakthrough, can be the entire coaching session. For me, it often is, because the moment that she went, that's it. It's like, that was the breakthrough.
Right.
She knew exactly what she needed to do. And once you have the break, you go to actions then.
Yeah, it's a bit like I think it's an Einstein quote, but it might be an apocryphal one about, if I had an hour to solve a problem to save my life, I'd spend 55 minutes making sure I had the right question, and then 5 minutes trying to answer it. Something like that. I can't remember if I've got it quite right, or if it's actually Einstein, but it's the same kind of thing sometimes. Once that is actually clear to someone, and in that case, you've got through all their kind of thinking to the actual truth.
If you don't have that, you're going to end up chasing your clients. And that's what I hear coaches do. They go around in circles around the problem, and they chase their clients. And the clients might appreciate having a safe space to talk, which is fine. That's a great value. I've had executives that's all they needed because they didn't feel safe anywhere else. But what's happening is all you're doing is giving them, they'll go, oh yeah, and they talk it through and they process it, and then they choose an action. But it's a surface, and the problem's not likely to go away. Like in why you do a root cause analysis, you solve the surface problems, it shows up somewhere else. And they probably won't even commit to doing it. So they'll say, yeah, I know it is that I need to do. And then the next session they say, oh, I didn't have the time. So we didn't really get there. You didn't change their thinking, right? And how they see that. You didn't break through the frames. And so it's okay to be a sounding board, but not all the time. You're not really coaching them.
And there was a particular bit in that section I liked as well, or I wanted to ask you about, which is, there's a question of what to do when the client says they want a plan. And there was some really nice stuff around that. Would you mind sharing that?
That's always, it's like, okay, so could this person plan without you? I always say, if they could do it without you, then, don't coach them on that. So, it's like a story I've often told about my client, a very accomplished senior VP in a large retail chain. And she's like, I'm overwhelmed. You have to tell me how to prioritize. And I could have, and we could have talked about what's important, what's the criteria, blah, blah, blah. But I said to her, oh, that's fascinating. You're the senior VP of human resources for one of the largest companies in the US. Prior to that, you were extremely successful corporate attorney. That's how you got this job. I know you went to a really tough law school. Somewhere along the line, I figured you had to know how to prioritize. What's stopping you now? And she's like, oh, I've lost my vision. I don't know why I'm here.
Right. There's the outcome, right?
Yeah, that's different. So you see, again, the person in front of you, what's stopping them from going off and doing the plan on their own? That's what I want to know. Why is it?
Yeah, and then let me just actually catch, because I think this is an interesting one, especially, again, it's like things that new coaches have when they start out. So there's a tension though, because the client, but just, I could give an answer to this, but I'm curious of yours. The client says they want something. In coaching, we follow the client's agenda. And yet what they really want, or what you might be saying, or people might think you're saying, is, yeah, but actually there's something more important than what the client says they want, which is what they really want, or something like that. But yeah, could you speak to that tension? Or it may not be a tension, and I may be just describing it strangely.
Okay. I'm very, very much in my original sessions with clients or chemistry sessions, whatever, just tell them I'm coaching you around your issues, not for you to do your work. So I tell them up front.
Yeah.
So that I set the expectation. But again, remember, you're coaching the person, not the issue. So it's like, okay, so we could go through some of your pros and cons on your plan. I might even just ask the question, if you took the time to do that, could you do that on your own? So can I just ask you, what stopped you? Is it timing? Is there something that you need to talk through in order to do the plan? I want to be of value to you. And I feel you could do this on your own. So what do you think about that? So I still am giving them the option. That client example I gave you, she'd been my client for a long time, and I knew, and she was fine. And, my executives like me to be in their face anyway. So, again, it's the expectation of our relationship. So remember, a plan or decision leads them to something else. I want to know, what is it you will have once you create the plan? I just want to know where we're going with that. You can't even create the plan anyway if you don't know what the outcome is, because, then, you don't have an anchor for it. So it'd be really great to know what the plan's going to give you. And I was listening to I do a lot of mentoring. I was listening to a recording where the woman said, I do want to really look at, before I decide to leave this job, what's the good and the bad? I want to do a pros and cons list and whatever. And the coach, said, well, okay, we'll start there. And they did. And then the client kept interrupting and saying, yeah, and I really hate this. I really hate this. And, and finally the coach said, you obviously have opinions about this, and it sounds like you know what you want to do. I'm just wondering if this pros and cons list is helping. And she says, oh God, no, I can go do this on my own. But this got me to thinking that what I really want is to leave this place, and I'm afraid to say it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. It shifted the coaching. So she kind of let the client start with that, and that's okay. Like I said, where they start is most of the time not where it ends up. So, okay, so let's just look at that for just a little bit, especially if you say, okay, so what are you going to have when you get this decision? And they're saying, well, I don't know yet. I need to do this first. Okay, so let's just start there. And it's okay for them not to know exactly up front. Once you get into the conversation, it will emerge. Because they do know, they're just afraid to look at it. I have found most people that say, I have a decision to make, they've already made the decision. They're afraid to take action.
Yeah, that's a powerful thing. Another thing's like written down just under where I wrote that bit on my notes was exactly that piece. What a powerful insight, which I'm just going to reflect it back in case anyone listening missed it, which is people say they need help making a decision. Almost always they've already made the decision. What they need is their help being brave enough to take it.
Good.
Yeah.
And you could hear it when they describe the options. It's like, well, I really want to do this, blah, 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 blah. But, they're paying me a lot of money, and I have a family, and there's no energy there. And oftentimes when they say they have to make a decision, they've gone to an either or. It's either this or that. Sometimes I might even start with, so it sounds like you've got the extremes. I'm just wondering if there's middle ground that you haven't really looked at. Oftentimes they haven't done that. It's either I do it or I don't. It's like, really? Is there for you a place that this is a journey and not a decision?
Yeah. And I think in a way, just to catch it, I think that's another place where support from a coach, it's like creating the fitness for what we need in the modern complex world with all its challenges, right? Is for people to be able to see the difference between the one extreme at one end and the one extreme at the other. And there's actually plenty in between. Marcia, I want to get to, before we finish in the not too distant future, I want to get to a little bit about how your work looks now and other than the book, what's coming up for you. But before that, I asked for some prompts. I always do for guests, and you gave a great one, which I can ask. Might have asked anyway, but when I saw it, I was like, "That's so good." And it's a selfish one for me because I'm working on a couple of books at the moment, and I have a regular thoughts of why the hell am I doing this? And the prompt that you gave me was, what value do you get from writing books when the process is long and the profits are little? And so I wanted to ask you that question, purely selfishly.
Well, for me, to start off with, I've always seen myself, I said I'm a teacher, but I've always been a writer too. I won a poetry contest in the 2nd grade.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And so I always had dreams of being a published author. When my publisher signed me, I cried, so
amazing.
And I always tell people, if you don't like writing, don't write a book. Please don't write a book if you don't like to write. Honestly. Or actually, my first book, I recorded a workshop I taught and had it transcribed, and then I started from there because I just didn't know how to start. And that was a good way to get something out there. That book I wanted out there because I knew, as I was teaching and speaking, and we haven't talked about that, but I also have taken a lot of improv acting and really, really honed my public speaking so I could speak to thousands and do keynotes and all of that. I've worked it. And that started because my dad would put me on tables and have me sing songs to people. Now I don't sing. And that's a whole other story why I don't do that. But I like the attention. So to be a speaker and to be out there, they always say you have to have a book. Well, I found that having a small book, a self-published small book, is a good brochure. I would give it to people, and they would read it and want to hire me to be their coach or bring me in to teach a class. So it was a marketing tool, really, the first one, and that I wanted to get these things down, because people always say, well, do you have a book? Do you have an audio? That was before they were saying, do you have video? But then Wonder Woman, my next book, was really my doctoral dissertation. So that was like, wow, I met my publisher and they wanted to publish it. That's cool. How many people get their dissertation published? So that was different. But then Discomfort Zone and Coach the Person came out of, I'm seeing a need in this world that I love, my community of coaches. And I'm mentoring and teaching, and they're screwing up in a lot of similar ways. And I want to address this. And I think I can do this and get it out there by writing, that I can't just do one-on-one. And that the book, it's will increase my visibility. So I have more conversations like this. We may not be talking if I hadn't published Coach the Person. So the book helps, and then my speaking helps give credibility to the book. The book lasts longer than a moment with me, and so there's great value to that. But again, you need to be serious about good writing and getting good editing and layout if you're not going to go through a publisher. And these days it doesn't matter. I've enjoyed my relationship with my publisher, but my self-published book is good too. But with a publisher, you'll make no money, but there's a broader visibility. So, it's a give and take. So I enjoy the process, but people come to me and say, I want to get a book out there. And I say, why? Well, because I want to create visibility. Do you like writing? No, I hate it. But, a good ghostwriter. Well, no, I don't. They're out there if that's what you want. And,
But why not do something that you actually like doing as a way to get visibility?
These days there's so many ways. You don't have to write the book. Back then it was, but now, people are watching videos and, reading snippets of things. I don't even know blog posts if they're going out or not, but, graphics with quotes.
People love that stuff these days, don't they?
Yeah, and my little 3-minute videos. Yeah, they love that. So yeah.
That's a nice answer. And I think that one of the things that you kind of touched on as well that I got a real feeling for as you were talking is the book is working when you're not, actually, isn't it? For you, it's like if there's these messages that it's really important for you to get out, then actually the great thing about this book is you didn't know it, right? But it was doing work in Battersea in southwest London this week, right? Monday to Thursday or whatever it was. Isn't that's super cool, right? It must feel cool for you. It feels cool for me.
Oh, it is. Yeah. When they, link with me on LinkedIn, oh, I've, been reading and using your book and all over the world. Yeah. So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you feel that too. So Marcia, just before we finish, tell me a little bit about, we've talked about the book and the writing and we, the teaching that you do and that it's international and training. What does your one-on-one practice look like these days? The people that you're actually working with, do you work with a lot of people at once? Anyone even anymore? I don't know. We haven't really asked that question, how much that happens. And how does that look? Because I just think there's something really interesting for someone who's been doing this for 25 years. You must have experienced a lot of different ways of working and have a lot of thoughts about, about how to work and where that's come to. And just curious, what comes to mind as what you've learned about how to work with people one-on-one and how your practice looks these days?
Okay, a couple things I want to share when you say these days. Well, these days is not real days, so
True. Yes, very true. Perhaps, yeah. If this were, in the average time, the kind of
right now my coaching
up until March,
Yeah, right now my coaching practice is just mentoring coaches, so
right. And that's useful. Just to say, that's useful to hear as well, because no one really knows what a lot of the time what's going on for people in the middle of this time. My practice has slowed down quite a bit too.
Yeah, and because I do mostly leadership, corporate, and it's corporate contracting, that's just stopped for right now. So so that's kind of not real. But there has been a journey. I started primarily with one-on-one clients and did both personal and corporate. I morphed into what I enjoyed the most was the leadership corporate coaching and not personal coaching. And also my fee structure went higher and it worked, for more the leadership corporate. And I will work with consulting firms that work with coaches and I'll do some of that, but I don't have a lot of coaches. I would say maximum 5 because I travel too much. Okay, for a little while I tried the team coaching, but 2 things. One, it didn't work for me because of the consistency of my travel. And 2, I didn't like it. I don't like coaching teams. So, it's a big thing now and it's a income or whatever, but you got to decide if you like it or not. And it's a lot of work and a lot of frustration. And if you're good at it, it works. And there's people that are, and it's not my thing. That's all.
Yeah.
So I don't do that.
And for you, how do you know if things are your thing?
Did I walk away saying, yeah, I like that?
Nice.
And most of the time with team coaching, I didn't.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Well, because generally I was brought in an intact team that was like so dysfunctional already. If it's a new team, it was great. We kick it off. That was fun. Yeah. We could do contracting and go forward. New team's great. Dysfunctional teams, not so much fun. And I did a lot of that in my corporate life. I wasn't necessarily coaching them, but I was even seen as the team police in my last company, because if I came in the room, they knew they were messed up.
That'd be a cool name for a consultancy, actually, wouldn't it? The team police.
Team police, yeah. Well, and usually I found they didn't have a combined vision, a shared vision. They were working at they didn't have an outcome that they were all going toward. They hadn't articulated it. That was usually the problem. So I could fix them a little bit, but I know how to do it. I just don't choose. So what I found was I love teaching, and I do a lot of mentoring with coaches going for their PCC, their MCC, and mentoring of their skills, not helping them establish their business. I might, if they have some questions, I'll share, but I don't know. Business acumen is a whole different thing. That's why the ICF created the whole line of, here's how to teach you to develop your coaching business. There's a ton of people out there doing that and making money off coaches, so I'd be careful, really vet them before you give them your money.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I again, my archetype at heart is teaching, but now I have to continue coaching in order to stay with being the teacher, going deeper with the teaching, the writing, the mentoring. So I can't just go do that. They always the professor who doesn't have any idea.
There's some integrity gap, isn't there, if you don't? And it's a bit like if you're a coach that only coaches other coaches, the same thing is kind of true. It's like something just not quite real about that.
Right? Exactly. So no, I wouldn't do that. So I always have, I say no more than 5 max. Yeah. When things are rolling, that are not coaches, that are actually leaders. But so no, it's not a huge amount. And I charge a lot of money for that now. So I don't need, like even 3 is fine with me. And we do the chemistry session and we both can tell if I'm the right coach for them. A lot of times they're still looking for somebody to tell them what to do, and a mentor or whatever. And it's just, I will refer, but please, anyone listening to this, please don't email me and ask me to refer to you. Because that's what happens. I have the people I refer to already, so until I get to be #1 coaching guru in the world and everybody and their brother comes to me.
Wait, you're pretty close to that, aren't you? number 5.
I was 3, but my goal,
no. Who's overtaking you?
It's Lisa. Yeah. No, there needs to be a woman way up there.
It also sounds, Marcia, like, you were saying a bit earlier on with the, I'm not here to help you, plan out your pros and cons. That in those conversations, you're really clear about that stuff. And that's, I'm sure, one of the ways that, you find out pretty quickly if you're the right person for those people, and if not. And you sound, the way you talk about it, like you're just very grounded in who you are as a coach.
In my initial coach training, one of our first classes, they said, define your ideal client. Well, I did, but back then you didn't really know who that was, because frankly, it's a merging of who I want to coach, but what's the world calling me to do? Where's my sweet spot in coaching? And so that refining of my ideal client has happened over the years. So, but you should have that picture. This is who I work best with, and know that even in any good coaching relationship, it could, after even a short time, that it's like, this recently happened to me, to where we really clicked at the beginning. We did some really good coaching, and then she went away on some journey, and came back and canceled the coaching, never telling me why. And I think I know in our last session, there were some things that I would change when I look back on that I got, maybe too friendly with her, and didn't, or maybe I pushed her too much, but whatever. Something happened, and because she didn't tell me, then I'm just speculating, which was really sad. I was hoping she would at least tell the stakeholder, but they all said, no, she just decided she wanted a different coach. And so in truth, I think she wanted someone to tell her. We went through some things, and she got to the point where it's like, no, I now need someone to tell me what to do. And honestly, she often said her husband told her that. You need someone to be more direct with you. This is how you should deal with this or that. And, so it just happens. It just happens.
And it's great. Thanks for sharing that, because I know that people listening in, I'm really glad that my, the person who's done a lot of I've done a lot of mentoring with, she's mentored me, I should say, I've had a couple in different ways, a bit like that. And it's quite affecting, especially the first time it happens, where someone just disappears, almost off the face of the earth. And it's like, how do I hold this? And I think what you just said, it's tricky. And without the actual information, guessing is not really, is not really worth it. Yeah.
On the flip side, I did a chemistry session with this new leader, technical mind, and he really wanted to be successful in his new senior position, and I did it through a consulting firm, and a big company here, big Fortune 100, and they came back to me, the consulting firm, and said, we got feedback for you of why he chose the other guy and not you. We thought you would like this so you can adapt for the next time. The feedback was, she was like so great in listening to me and hearing me and asking me questions to make me think. But the other guy came in with tools and here, use this, do that. And so that was so much more proactive. I chose him. And, and I had to say, I said to the consulting firm, I said, actually, you gave me a compliment, not tough feedback. And I'm wondering how you educated your client on what coaching is, what your definition of coaching is, because maybe you and I don't see it the same way, and I neglected to ask them that in the first place. They had read all my stuff and I thought they knew what type of coach I was. I assumed, and I think they just saw me as a big visible coach and didn't really look into that. So I realized that my setting the expectations around coaching has to be with the stakeholders, not just the client.
Yeah, how interesting. But I think that, that even in itself is a tension, isn't it? People, sometimes clients desperately think they want tools and structures and all that kind of thing, when what they, and maybe that person chose perfectly for them in this moment, or maybe they will still be facing the same things because no one's interrupted their thinking in the way that coaching does.
Maybe they needed both. It's not that I never give tools and
no, of course,
suggestions, but I start with coaching and determine what it is they really need, and if there's nothing. So if this guy really, really, really never had any experience, but I would even step back and say, did you ever have a leader in your life that you liked, or a teacher? What'd you like about that? Would you like to integrate some of that into you? I would still explore it first before I started throwing things at them. But if that's what he wanted mentoring, and it wasn't explained. Yeah.
And that conversation with the sponsor sounds, that's the definitions of coaching, right? It's almost like back where we started, isn't it? Marcia, I know that you've got other things to be doing today. I'm curious, before we finish, is there anything else that it feels important to share in this conversation right now? Anything that we haven't said that's coming up for you?
I think what I had said earlier about every year I realize I'm a better coach and wondering what I was doing last year. And certainly what I was doing when I started. Now, it wasn't that I wasn't providing value. People felt safe and they talked and they gave me great testimonials. I just wasn't really coaching when I started. So we do provide value in giving people a safe space to be who they are. But this is an ongoing journey. We don't just go through school and we're done. And the deeper you go with what it really is and how to be with it, the more fulfilling it truly is. And so the whole, continue your development. It's understandable that in certification you really need, solid CEUs that develop your practice, because you're never done. So, mastery is a journey, not a destination. We've all heard that. But I think it also helps us as humans. So getting back to, I always say, mastery is the deepening of presence, not the perfection of skills. Right now, it's not the perfect thing you're going to say to people. It's the presence you hold. Right now, even. It's so important. And that just keeps getting better over time as we develop our instrument.
Absolutely. Beautiful place there to bring the conversation to a close. I'll put a link into the book and to all the other bits and pieces we've touched on. So many great little references and things. And we didn't talk about John Dewey. Next time we'll have to have another conversation just about him another time. Marcia, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you, and best of luck with the book, and look forward to speaking again sometime in the future.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed this, Robbie. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
You too.
Thanks, Marcia. That was super fun.
Yeah, that was way
flew by. At least for me.
It was, and I didn't even need a break. That's great. So no, I appreciate that. I appreciate somebody that knows coaching to talk to in this. And so, yeah, that was great. Thank you. I look forward to sharing it.
Yeah, so it'll probably, the timing of this conversation means I've just put an episode out today, so it won't be for a few weeks before it comes out. But as soon as it does, I'll send it to you. And is it Sarah who I was emailing as well?
There's so much coming out anyway. It's getting lost. So that's perfect.
Great.
That's perfect.
Yeah, and yeah, just thanks for diving in and sharing everything. And like, super fun. We could have definitely, like, there were like a million branches of that tree that we could have gone down in a different conversation we would have, but really fun to just play. And yeah, at the point where you want to have another conversation, or it feels like there's something else, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that we could get into, I'm sure. But otherwise,
yeah. So later in the summer, you know, in September, we're going to start promoting this big WBEX program. I'm very excited about it because it'll be a 6-month. You know, it's called Breakthrough Coaching. So it's a lot of what we talked about today, of really getting into it, what it is, how to do it. I'll do a session. And there'll be practice sessions, exercise sessions that are facilitated. Then I'll do demos and a Q&A. So we're really, you know, getting into the nuts and bolts.
That's really cool. Because I mean, you know, some of the other, there were some great bits that I would have loved to have got into now and next. I think there was some really nice little distinctions and details that you kind of put in there that I think that, you know, for me were useful, but I think for lots of people it's just like, just remember this stuff, and a bunch of other parts as well. I think. Yeah, I can imagine. And also, the vertical, horizontal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like, again, I can imagine that getting both for you to deepen the work and the ideas, but also people to bring it to life, getting to see demos and practice sessions on all those little details. I can imagine that'll be really powerful.
Yeah,
so yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that it'll be a really important program for the coaching world. So that's what I'm hoping. And they're excited about it. They're driving me crazy with the amount of work I have to do for them.
Oh, really?
Well, they have the huge market, you know, huge team. They got the marketers, they got the partners, they got the program developers, and it's like,
massive operation, right?
It's a huge operation, and they're doing things that I couldn't do on my own. So, you know, it's like I have this huge team working for me, and we're going to put this out in the world and see what happens. So
super cool. Yeah. Well, I'd love to have a conversation about that sometime. And other than that, yeah, I mean, best of luck.
So Robbie, can I name you as a partner? They're looking just for people that just, you know, like me and want to help, you know, get the word out.
Yeah, sure. By all means. Well, I should say, what does that involve? They'll
just reach out to you and just say, hey, this is coming up. If you help promote it, you can make a commission.
Oh, in that case, by all means. No, but of course, even Marcia, even when there is no commission available, if there's something really good happening, by all means, let me know. And yeah, if there's anything else I can help with, let me know, and all that kind of thing.
And you are in the UK?
Yeah, I'm in London.
Okay, good. It's good to know that. Well, because, you know, I want to make this global, and so it'd be really, so thanks.
Yeah, no, by all means. And it's the podcast has been a really interesting thing. It's relatively new, but it's really interesting to kind of feel that there's a space. And I love those things. You know, I get little flashes of what you're talking about with the books. You know, because you find out someone in Singapore is telling people when they're training coaches about this podcast, and who knew, and all those kind of things. So it's been a real pleasure. I love that.
And, you know, this is so much longer than most of them, but I'm like, wow, but it went into depth, and isn't there a need for that? I need to go, Robbie, because I do have to go to the bathroom now.
Have a great rest of the day. And lovely to meet you, and speak again at some time in the future, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
And thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.